Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
Today, I am announcing that I am a candidate for President of the United States.
And welcome to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock. Thank you for joining us. The scene was Bentonville, Arkansas, as former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson launched his 2024 bid for the Republican nomination for U.S. President. In advance of the pomp and circumstance, political reporter Samantha Boyd caught up with Hutchinson for a Q&A.
Well, I do, and you look at the challenges that America faces. It deals with the experiences that I've had, whether as a federal prosecutor addressing the challenge of crime that we have in our inner cities and across the country. If you're looking at the challenge of fentanyl coming to our country through the border and working with Mexico, I did that as head of the DEA. If you're looking at our national security issues abroad, I've had the breadth of experience dealing with the European Commission and our European nations, Latin America, but then I think really it's important, and America looks for a governor's leadership, somebody who's been an executive authority, have had to make tough decisions, and so my experience as governor of Arkansas for 8 years, balancing a budget, lowering taxes, creating a surplus, advancing education, these are credentials that are important for the next president. Well, first of all, you're focused on our problems. We got to have a pro-growth energy policy that's just not all green, but is actually looking at the production of energy for our future and for our independence. It is about making sure that we can secure the border, as I said. It's also, though, about pushing back from Washington on their leftist social agenda that impacts us in our schools and in our communities. And so I want to address the problems, but it's also really an optimistic view of our country that I have. I believe that America's best days are ahead, and that we can come together as a nation and we can grow our economy, we can reduce the deficit, we can lead across the globe again, and it's a very competitive environment with China, and we've got to be able to enhance our technology education. We've got to be able to compete in a technology sense with China, but also we have to be able to make sure that we are strong enough to compete against adversary countries like China that has ambitions on Taiwan and is a threat to many of the Western world.
There's several other Republicans running right now, and then we're expecting a few more to announce here soon. One of them is obviously the former president, Donald Trump. Can you talk about why you feel the need to run against him and the other Republicans who are in this at this point?
Well, in one sense, you're running for the office, but whenever you have a former president in, it's like running against an incumbent. And I believe that we need a course correction in terms of the dialogue that we have with the American public, trying to bring people together. And I don't believe President Trump can do that effectively. I think he's divisive. And so I believe I can bring our country together in a better way along consistent conservative values that takes our country in the right direction. So I want to provide the American people the choice, the people of Arkansas, the people of Iowa, and let them make a decision. But I don't like all of the investigations. I don't like all of the criminal indictment that's being considered. I'd like to see this decided in the ballot box and not in the courtroom. But I believe we need to have a different direction than Donald Trump. And quite frankly, I don't believe that he can win in a November election. He's lost before to Joe Biden. I don't think we need to retrace those steps.
Yeah, I've read the same thing, that Trump would not have a great chance running against Biden, but someone else who might win this primary would have a better chance. Do you think you would have a better chance beating Biden than Trump?
Oh, I do. I do. You know, for me, the challenge is name recognition, but name recognition comes with doing well in the early caucus or primary states, and so you'll be a household name very quickly. And once you become that, people clearly are not excited about Joe Biden and another 4 years of his leadership. They want to go a different direction, and the Republicans can offer that, but we just have to offer someone that can win the independent vote, can win the suburban votes, and my record in Arkansas of bringing people together demonstrates that I can do that.
Do you think there's been like a shift since even Trump left office of Republicans, and you think more are starting to align with you and your beliefs, and there's less people, going as far right maybe, and are coming back kind of to a more moderate level, if that makes sense? Do you think they're coming back to your kind of way of Republican?
Well, people are very concerned about the direction of our country. They want to see a change in direction, and they want somebody that's going to fight for that. And so that's important, and that's not changing, but what is changing is the view of Donald Trump that he's the one that can best lead us in fighting these battles in the future. And I think people recognized after we lost the last 2022 election, when Donald Trump was out there endorsing candidates and we were losing, and he was relitigating the 2020 election, they said we need to go a different direction. Now he's had a bump in the polls because the sympathy factor comes in. People believe he's been picked on by the prosecution in New York, and so he's had a bump from that, but that's going to subside, and people's going to look at this both in terms of policy, in terms of trust, but also who can win and lead this country in the right direction.
What do you think about the prosecution in New York, and do you think he needs to pull out of the race?
Well, I've been a federal prosecutor. I know how to make prosecutorial judgments, and that's a case I would never have brought as a felony. I think Alvin Bragg made a mistake in that, in his legal theory. So no, I don't like that case. I also have a high view of the presidency of the United States, and people in Arkansas know that I've always said that, whenever an official is indicted, brought criminal charges, they need to focus on that, and the office is more important, and they should step aside. Donald Trump is not going to do that. He's going to run, and he has a right to do that, and that's why I say we're going to have to decide this at the ballot box.
What's next for you? I know you're making the formal announcement Wednesday. Where are you going after that? What are going to be your focuses for this next season of this candidacy? Well,
in the short term, I'm raising a lot of money, and that's important for Arkansas. That's been very supportive, but our website is asa2024.com, and people can go there, they can help us out. And so we're raising money, and I'll be doing that, but I'll also be going back to South Carolina and New Hampshire within the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'll be going back to Iowa this weekend after I announce, and so it's those early states, it's raising the money, it's increasing the visibility of the campaign. But I'm really excited about being able to announce here in Arkansas. That's important for me. It's important for the nation to know my story, how I grew up, the common roots that I have, and the values that I have that really come from this incredible state. So that's why I'm announcing here in Arkansas.
That's KARK Fox 16 political reporter Samantha Boyd and former Governor Asa Hutchinson. Now, Samantha's going to join us later in the program. We'll also catch up with Meet the Press moderator and host Chuck Todd. This is Capitol View. Stay with us.
Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. Joining me now, Fox 16 and KARK political reporter Samantha Boyd. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I love the political reporter. I'm not sure that's my title quite yet. I want it to be.
Well, that is the title you get on this show. So how about that?
It's about all I cover.
All right. So you're up there. Your first presidential announcement. Maybe there'll be 5 or 6 more in your lifetime.
I hope so.
What was your take on the atmosphere? I mean, it was a small town. It kind of had some throwback nostalgia to me. But what was your take on just the energy of the crowd and the way that everything was staged, and just what were your takeaways?
Yeah, we were just talking about this. This was my first one to ever be at, so it was kind of hard to know what to expect. But, being there, it felt kind of old school. He had a school band there. He had cheerleaders there. And then tons of just families, kids. I talked to a school class, or a school even, that they brought several grades of classes there, kind of there for an educational thing. It felt like, at least for Arkansas, a historic moment. There's not been a ton of presidential candidates come out of Arkansas, so it felt kind of, at least for Arkansas, like this was a huge deal for us. A lot of people there, a lot of enthusiasm, but even, like I mentioned, people who weren't necessarily there to support him, just there to observe. It felt like something that we were going to look back on for years and years to come and say, you know, remember when we had a presidential candidate announced out of Bentonville, Arkansas in the square? I will say, because he kind of announced this presidential campaign already on ABC, it wasn't a huge surprise. Like, everyone was kind of like, okay, we're here for round 2 of the announcement, you know what I mean? So we all knew what to expect, and maybe that had an impact on how many people came. But it was certainly something that I think everyone's going to remember.
So you interviewed him. Obviously, we played a portion of that, the last segment of the show. You also got to see the speech as he presented it there on the square. Kind of, what was some of the messaging? What do you think is going to be some of the primary points that he's going to try to drive home in this primary?
We talked about this as well earlier. Kind of a subtle anti-Trump to me, and then a not so subtle anti-Biden was kind of the theme to me, at least in our interview. Because he is presenting himself, at least to me, as a more moderate candidate, but also a consistent, proven Republican leader. I think it gets to him a little bit when people question his conservativeness, and he continues to hammer down that he has been a conservative since our state was a blue state. And he, talked to me about how he had an impact in turning our state into the red state that it is today, the very red state that we are today. So I think that's really part of his theme right now is, while I might be more moderate than, say, former President Trump, I'm still a very red Republican. And then when it comes to issues, he talked a lot about the economy, talking back on what all he did for Arkansas's economy as the governor. Border security, he talked about when he worked for Homeland Security and then Department of Drug Enforcement and Administration, and then obviously crime, just the issues that you hear about often with any Republican candidate.
I know Mike Preston, the former AEDC director, who was his top jobs chief, helped introduce him, I think, on the square. So that says a little bit about his focus on the economy and where he would be going with some things like that. And to your point, I mean, I can remember when Asa Hutchinson would get beat 70-30 in a political election. And he was out there. He was one of the first, well, I won't say he was one of the first, but he was a champion of the Second Amendment, of the pro-life movement, when those were not the biggest issues driving Arkansas politics there. So interesting to see him do that.
And the steps he announced on, too, I do think it's worth noting. You guys probably heard in my story if you watched it. Steps he announced on were the same steps where 30 years ago he announced his run for Senate. And he lost that one. So I thought it was interesting that he would come back to those steps. But him losing that was also symbolic of, after that point, he kept fighting. He started winning after that, really. And so it was kind of symbolic for him, and was a symbolic place for him to do it, because it kind of went back and showed what all he's done over the past 30 years.
Was there a big takeaway from the interview that you did with him? I think you did about 20 minutes with him there. Was there anything that you just kind of walked away from the interview? It's like, I haven't heard that before, or it's interesting that he made that point?
I did my homework, and I'm proud of that. The night before, I was up until probably midnight doing a lot of homework on this. So there's nothing that surprised me, I will say. I did try and get some answers out of him that Fox News had tried to get, and thought maybe I can get it. And I got maybe a little bit. But one thing that I walked away kind of just, was interested to hear was how much he plans to fight on this. Right now, polling when he was interviewed by Fox the night before was at 1%. Another poll had come out the day, I want to say, of our interview, or maybe the night before, that had gotten him up to 3%. He was tied with Nikki Haley and Tim Scott, which are 2 big names, I would say. And he was encouraged by that, of course, in the interview, but he really talked a lot about how he's not going to stop fighting at this point. He is going back to Iowa this weekend for the 9th time, and that's a lot to me for a candidate who just formally announced 2 days ago. And he just said, I think I can get there. He also said, and I know we've heard this from him before, but it was interesting just to hear him say, I can beat Biden if I can just get to that point. I've just got to get past this GOP nomination.
Yeah.
And you do wonder if he's going to get it, with all of the bickering with Trump and DeSantis at this point. Maybe people will go to another option. Who knows?
The debates will be interesting to watch. So I got to wrap it up here. Okay. But we will be watching him. I'm sure you'll probably get a trip to Iowa out of all of this.
I'm praying. I have texted my assignment manager probably 3 times, and I'm like, send me to Iowa. So I hope we can both go. I think that'd be fun.
Samantha Boyd, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Good job. All right, we're back with more right after this.